Hello, everyone. Welcome to another captivating installment of the Business of Aesthetic podcast show. This is Naren Arulraja, your co-founder and co-host at the heart of the business aesthetics community and podcast. First, I want to take a minute to thank all of our listeners, all of our supporters. We literally have tens of thousands of people in the United States and across the world who are aesthetic practice owners. This includes dermatologists, plastic surgeons, med spa owners, a whole range of entrepreneurs who are doing interesting and amazing things in the field of aesthetics. So I want to take a minute to thank you for supporting us. We are the largest community in the US and possibly the world, focused on helping aesthetic practice owners go to the next level, top grade their teams, their marketing, their business. So if you love this podcast that I'm going to do today, feel free to share it with your friends and colleagues. We have a treat for you today. I have an amazing guest who is also a fellow co-host of the podcast and the founder of an amazing practice. She literally started from nothing. She decided to go on her own and build a practice. We're going to get into that, and built a $3 million practice in little more than 2 years, literally if I were to be exact, around 26, 27 months. So I have Dr. Lauren Umstead with me. Hey, Dr. Lauren, how are you today?
Hey, Naren, thanks so much for having me. I'm a facial plastic surgeon in the greater Kansas City area. I grew up in Kansas City and I decided early, kind of in my training, that I didn't want to work for anybody. I wanted to be my own boss. So, right out of fellowship, I decided to open my own practice. We specialize in strictly the face and the neck. We're only a cosmetic practice. I would say right now about 70% of our kind of efforts and work goes into the surgical part of that, face and neck. Whereas the other 30% is some of the non-surgical stuff like Botox and chemical peels. When we opened our doors, we had 3 employees, me being one of them. And now we are up to 8. And I actually have 2 open positions right now. So we have grown pretty substantially in terms of our business, our revenue, but also our team. And I think, I decided to open my business because I didn't want a boss. But I also think that like work-life balance, I have 2 little kids, I'm married, and I just never had a great example of someone in medicine working full time and having children and running their own business. So I didn't have a lot of great examples of how to model my practice or how to model the the team environment that I wanted to work in. And so I think over the last couple of years, we've tried several things. Some things have worked, some things haven't worked. But overall, I'm so incredibly happy that I decided to open my own business. And I think, we talked about revenue briefly when you introduced me, but I think if you do great work and you take great care of patients and you treat your team really well, the money will follow. I think that's a byproduct of the day-to-day stuff that we do.
Awesome. Yeah, we're going to have a very open and honest conversation. She's going to share with us the good, the bad, the ugly, the lessons learned. So hopefully those listening to us, whether you are just starting out or even somebody who has been practicing for a while and maybe in a rut and you've wanted to kind of kickstart things, I think you'll get ideas, inspiration from Lauren. So Lauren, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. You said right off a fellowship, you decided to be your own boss. I don't typically see that. I've interviewed a lot of people, the who's who of plastic surgery. And usually even the best of the best, usually they don't go right out of fellowship. So, I guess I have a couple of questions. How do you have the confidence, both on the clinical and the business side, that, hey, I'm ready?
I think a lot of it boils down to your personality. We recently in our office, we took an Enneagram test, which if you just Google Enneagram, it spits out kind of a description of you as a personality. And I'm very much an 8, which is a challenger. From a young age, I always felt like I was right, whether we're arguing about, stuff at the grocery store, stuff in the classroom, stuff in the operating room. I always feel like I can do things better than other people, so to speak, not necessarily surgically. I definitely sense that I am very aware of the fact that I'm young in my surgical career. But I also think from a business perspective, I told myself, there are so many people out there that run their own business. And while I don't have any strict business experience, there can't be any magic to it. Like I'm smart enough to get through medical school, residency, fellowship. So surely if I lean on the right people in terms of my banking, my accounting, attorneys, then I can run a business too. It can't be that hard, is the sense that I took. I think now that we're a couple years in, and I didn't realize this initially, but I have my surgeon brain, which says that you get like one shot at things, so to speak. Everything has to be perfect. You have to very much minimize your risk when approaching a patient and maximizing our return on investment, essentially. There's really no room for errors surgically. Whereas business, I think, is totally the opposite. I think that if you wait to have 100% certainty with things in the business arena, you are automatically putting yourself at a disadvantage. And if you're not allowing yourself to make mistakes while growing your business, you're not pushing yourself hard enough. So I think I have my surgeon brain and my business brain. And I think with the business, you have to push yourself to grow and try new things before it feels comfortable. Because otherwise, you're missing out on opportunities for you, your patients, and your team.
No, that's excellent advice. So let's start by talking about, I guess, the elephant in the room, time management, right? You are a mom, you are a business owner, $3 million annually, 8 going to 10 team members. And you did all of this in less than, like you started in August 2022, and here we are, and you're on track to do 3 million plus this year. So you have done amazingly well, and you had no prior experience. So what does your day look like? Like, first of all, talk about how many hours do you work, all in? How much of that is surgery? How much of that is, managing the business? How much of that is like improving or making the business better? To me, they are kind of same, but they're not the same. Like, paying people and doing your reviews, etc. That is just management, right? So just give us a ballpark of your time management. Are you like working 60-hour weeks? I don't know. If that is the case, just let us know what's going on with time.
And I would say that things have morphed over time as the business has grown. Currently, our office is open from 9 to 4, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., which if you had asked me years ago when I was in residency working 80 hours a week, if those would be my office hours, I would have probably laughed at you. I would have said, no, 8 to 6 is probably what we should be open. But I think in order to recruit the highest level team members that I have, and to keep them and to allow myself time at home with our family. So currently our business is open from 9 to 4. We operate 3 of those days per week. And then I see patients in clinic 2 days a week. And then and I should say it's all here in one building. So I'm here physically in our building Monday through Friday. I'm physically working and seeing patients doing business stuff during those hours, but the mental load of having people that you're responsible for, both from a patient perspective and a team perspective, and working a lot at home too. I would say I probably work anywhere from 60 to 70 hours a week.
Right.
But to
How
me,
much of that is clinical versus working, managing the business versus working on, I know just ballpark, but just give me a perspective.
probably 60-40
60
of
is clinical and then 40 is business.
business and self-improvement. I go to different surgical conferences. I consume a lot of information online in terms of business development and personal development as a surgeon. A lot of that is also education for myself. But even when I'm exercising, I'm listening to business podcasts, so you can lump that into the amount of time I spend per week.
Yeah.
I also have always been one to work a lot. From a young age, I was a competitive gymnast. So it's very normal for me to be consumed by something. I was consumed with gymnastics until I was 20. And then I was consumed with my medical and surgical education until I was 32. Now I'm completely consumed by my business. There's no like balance, so to speak, in my day to day. And I still struggle personally with putting my phone down when I'm around my kids. I have to tell myself that my kids are so young and they're so much like a sponge right now that I have to physically put my phone away when I'm with them. But I can't say I'm perfect at that, you know.
Right.
I
No,
also
I mean,
have
go ahead.
I also have an incredible spouse. And so we, he works a lot too. And so tag teaming is what has made it all possible.
Right. I assume you have full-time help with the kids, so you don't have to worry about like all the mundane day-to-day running of the house and the... No?
No, it's just me and
Oh,
my
wow.
husband. Yeah, they go to school.
Right. How old are they?
They're 3 and 6.
Oh, okay. So they have
So
like a nursery or something like that.
they go to school from 8 a.m. until about 4:30 p.m.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So you drop them off or your husband drops them off and you guys, and then once you're home, you're home. Somebody's with the kids, weekends, evenings. That's awesome. So coming back to what you did, I know you built a practice, 7,000 square foot practice right off the bat. So you took a lot of risk. It takes a lot of guts and then not flinch, right? A lot of times when you take a lot of risk, we flinch, we get worried, we panic, we do dumb, stupid things, and then that makes things worse. So, so talk to us about the journey. What did you decide to do and what you did? So let's even go before, August 2022, before you even opened the door. When did you decide to start a practice? Why did you? I know you're from Kansas City, so I guess that's a motivation. So talk to us about all of that stuff. How did you pick the location? You know,
So my fourth year of residency, which my residency training was 5 years, and then I did a 1 year fellowship. So towards the end of my residency, I decided I'm going to do facial plastics. I love the cosmetic component. I'm going to apply to facial plastics fellowships. The next two steps is, well, what does my future look like? I knew I wanted to do cosmetic private practice. We are both from the Kansas City area, so 2 and 2 equals 4. I started looking for practices in the Kansas City area that I could potentially join because that's the easiest
hmm
path of least resistance. There was not anything that really caught my eye in terms of a group that I could join. I certainly did not want to work for a big hospital. And so then I started looking for people who might be wanting to sell their practice. And there was one person that I talked to pretty in depth about that. But it got to the point where I thought, what am I even buying here? They didn't own the real estate. I was just buying some old equipment and a list of patients that they had operated on. So the next step was, well, maybe I should open my own practice. I really don't know what that looks like, but surely I can rent a room somewhere. And then the dream just kept incrementally growing. It's not like right out of the gates, I thought, oh, I'm gonna
So you
build
started dreaming this before fellowship or when you after fellowship, like this whole
before
idea of,
fellowship.
okay, makes sense.
Fast forward to in fellowship, I decided that I was gonna model my practice to where I was going to be the only surgeon, at least starting out. I wanted my own surgery center and my clinic to all be under one roof for convenience purposes. It was during COVID. And so, a lot of the elective surgeries in hospitals got shut down. A lot of the private practice surgeons out there were able to get by because they did have autonomy over their own surgery center. So then me and my husband's also very experience in the business world. He works in the world of restaurants and property management. So that was very helpful.
Hmm.
So we said, well, how about we buy a building and renovate it? Well, we couldn't find a great building that could also be converted into a surgery center because the surgery center is a whole can of worms. When you think about the firewalls and oxygen and all of the like building requirements. So again, the dream grew. We decided that, oh, we'll just buy some land and build a building. And so the southern part of Kansas City, it has a lot of open land that's, not yet developed. So we found this perfect piece of land in a great part of Kansas City. And then we met with architects and we found a builder and we started building. And it took about 2 years from initially purchasing the land, designing the building, constructing it, getting city permits, and then getting a state license, which is what's required in Kansas for my surgery center. So all in all, it took about 2 years. But the dream never really started out the 7,000 square foot building. It just kept growing because I couldn't find anything I liked. So I
Right.
just built what I wanted.
Makes sense. I was going to say, so when did you finish your fellowship?
In the spring of 2021.
Okay. So
Mhm.
like, so before you even got into fellowship, you bought the land, you started building. So in August of 2022, you were able to, so you only had like a year and a half. So what did you do in that year and a half? You finish your fellowship and you're not ready to open because the location is not ready yet. So you had spring till August next year. So like little more than a year.
Yeah, it didn't ever start out that it was going to take that long. It was after COVID, the construction industry was so
Oh,
volatile. And so we thought that the building would be ready to go maybe a month or two after I finished fellowship. And so
right.
I didn't plan to really work anywhere. Um, and so really all that time was spent getting the business ready, marketing, and telling my story online for potential patients.
So you built your
Um,
TikTok page. You have like 140,000 followers on TikTok. That is your number one, marketing method. So you started doing that right after fellowship, is it? You just started posting content
during fellowship.
during fellowship. Oh, okay.
Yes, I very much decided that I was going to document the whole process. It seemed intimidating because I was like, well, I'm this young surgeon. I don't really want to like broadcast the fact that I'm a young surgeon, but people want a story and they want to be able to connect and see you as a human. And so I literally documented everything, the design process, the approvals, the denials, the equipment purchases, the hiring, the day we opened. I mean, if you go way back in my very early videos, you can see footage of like the concrete being poured for the plot of the building that I'm in right now. It's pretty
Right.
cool. Yeah.
So this is a multi-million dollar project. So financing and planning your numbers is critical, right? Because for a long time, money is going out, nothing is coming in. You need a bank to back you and stuff. So I assume you had some help in that. Like, can you talk about that whole? Because one of the mistakes I see people make is they don't plan their numbers correctly, and so they just think, oh, it's going to be less expensive than it actually is, and then they go in and they expect everything to work out in a jiffy, and it doesn't, and the pressure of like these huge bills to pay every month keeps growing. So how do you talk about that whole, and any advice and tips for people trying to do what you're doing?
Well, there's a division. You have to think about my building in the real estate
Yeah.
and the build, and then you have to think about the business itself because I am pretty conservative person in general, although listening to this back doesn't sound like it. I assumed it would take 3 or 4 years for us to break even. And so
Oh,
you
that's
have
great.
you have to be able to sustain yourself for that period of time. So property wise, building the building, I mentioned that my husband's in real estate. So their company owns the actual building and I am their tenant.
Perfect.
So
So
it was
they
like
finance the whole thing. You just pay them a quote unquote rent, so to speak.
I pay him rent, yes,
Yeah,
every
got
month.
it. Yeah.
And so they were in charge of that. I got to build Barbie Dream House and then I got to live in Barbie Dream House. And then the business line of credit. So I wasn't sure what my monthly expenses would
So
be.
let me ask you this, if you can share this. What was your monthly rent, or is your monthly rent? And is it fixed, or does it go up for a project like this?
It is fixed. It's just under 20,000 a month.
Okay. So that's a big. So on day one, you have to have 20,000 just to kind of pay for the building. So
Yes.
that's fixed. And then you have the business, right? Your team, your
Mhm.
equipment, all the other expenses. Did this 20,000 include leasehold improvements, or did it no? Like, like adding, like setting it up the way you want, surgery center, that's all separate, right?
That's
Okay,
all separate.
got
Yep.
it.
And I pay for everything. So when you read your lease, which, it was my husband's company that I signed the lease with, but if you are signing your lease, you need to ask about property taxes. You need to ask about um, catastrophic things like wind and rain. And, we had a flooding in my building. And so I paid for all of that. But it's a win-win for his company and my company. So the business line of credit that I took out with the bank, I had to guess on a lot of that stuff. And I queried a lot of my colleagues that are older than me and have surgery centers. And I said, what is a ballpark of your malpractice? What's the ballpark for your payroll? What's the ballpark for your OR consumables every month? I leaned on these other people who've been there, done that, and who were willing to share some information with me. Currently, my fixed, or not my fixed, but my monthly expenditures are over 100,000 a month, which is a lot. But
Right.
I have some excellent people that work here with me. The surgery center equipment and medications and all of that stuff is so expensive. Um, so I knew I was going to run in the red for a while before I would start to float. And I'm still paying back on my line of credit now, but we will probably be able to pay that off at the end of the year.
So when you say line of credit, so it took you a while to break even. So the line of credit paid kept you afloat till before you broke even, right? How long were
Mhm.
you like losing money before you started breaking even?
Probably 8 months, 10 months.
10 months. Okay. Were
Yeah.
you stressed out during that time? Like, was this stressful or not
Oh,
really?
I live my life stressed out. I'm always stressed about the money. I'm stressed about my patients having complications. I'm stressed about my kids having the perfect upbringing. Yes, no, I constantly think about that kind of stuff.
Right.
It's hard to put into words how much weight I feel, which I'm sure you understand.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I understand. I mean, it's your baby, and if it works, it's yours. If it doesn't, it's yours too. So it's a two-edged sword. It cuts both ways.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, so that's awesome. Now let's talk about, did you go all in on like um, equipment? I know as a surgeon you need certain things, so I'm not talking about those things. I'm talking about like the non-invasive technologies and whatnot. Or did you like build your practice first and then slowly invest on? In other words, were there things we're going to do right now and things we're going to do later? Can you talk about that?
So while I've made these huge investments, I personally am a super frugal person. And
Mm-hmm.
so opening our doors day one, I was pretty calculated on the things that we needed to have non-negotiable to be able to properly do great surgery on people. But I also recognize that, for example, it doesn't make sense for me to take out another loan for a laser right now.
Yeah.
So I had my big purchases planned. I told myself that when I felt comfortable, my first big purchase would be a decent CO2 laser.
Mm-hmm.
And so I bought our first laser maybe 16 months ago.
Right.
I was able to buy it outright, which was nice, so I didn't pay any interest on it. And I got it for right around, I think, 80 or $90,000. And it paid for itself so fast because I'm able to use it in the operating room. And so the price point of a CO2 laser in the OR is much higher than in clinic. Um, and then other things, I don't have every single device out there. I think that We are not here to compete with every med spa in the greater Kansas City area. I think a lot of people have IPL, for example. And so for the time being, I personally think that if someone is a great candidate for IPL, I would just send them to a great colleague down the street versus me investing in 8 different pieces of capital equipment that one, it's the initial investment, but then after that, it's the warranty, the upkeep. I mean, things break. It's just another thing to add to the list of things that you have to manage, inspect, make sure that they're working properly.
All right. Let's switch gears. Let's talk about what kind of a practice you wanted to build. Let's start by maybe you telling me, like, if I've never been to your practice and I meet you on a plane and you tell me I'm a plastic surgeon, this is what I do. What would you tell me? Like, what is that practice that you are obviously building? Now, again, what I mean by building is like that's what you want your customers to say about you, right? That's what I mean.
I want every patient to come in and feel as though they are our only patient that day. We are arguably a lower volume, but a higher overall care for each patient that we see. And that goes from the 1 hour Botox patient that I just had with a new patient, all the way up to the one surgical case I'll do tomorrow, where we're doing face, neck, upper lids, brow lift, laser. I think that each patient needs to feel as though they have our undivided attention, and we are committed to listening to them, understanding their concerns and goals, presenting them all the options they have for big improvements and small improvements, depending on how much invasiveness they're wanting, and then seeing them out until the very end. We kind of see ourselves as a boutique practice in that we have smaller patient volumes, but those patients, by being smaller volume, we're able to spend more time with each patient and really feel like they've been heard and have a really, really good understanding of what their options are and which option is best for them based on our discussion.
Makes sense. Makes sense. How now let's switch gears to uh, patient experience. You kind of touched on it. Like, what are the key components to kind of provide that experience? Like, where they feel like they are the only person that day, and they get your undivided attention, and I mean, you're all in for them. So, how do you, create it all the way from the phone to all the other pieces that touch that patient?
So 2 things come to mind. One is branding and one is education. And I think we are in such a niche environment that providing free education to our patients is what's going to gain their trust initially when they're first seeking you out online. Education in every sense. So putting out free content online for patients to consume and educate themselves on what you provide, and whether they go to you for it or not, they're still getting good information from someone who's, well trained and has their best interest at heart. Educating them on the front end of surgical consults. I try to be as transparent as possible with patients. We have all of our prices for everything online. I think that's part of education.
Mm-hmm.
Having more than enough team members in your office so that when a patient calls in and is querying your team about X, Y, or Z, that team member has the 15 minutes to spend on the phone with someone answering all their questions before they decide to come in. During the treatment process, let's say a surgery patient, giving them enough information at each stage of surgery consult, their preoperative appointment, the morning of surgery, the evening of surgery, the next day, the 1 week, 2 week, 3 week, follow-ups of them. So I think part of it is education. And then I think the other big component of how we are different is everything has to be on brand, so to speak. When you think about the vision of your company, everything should come back to, is this on brand? And I think brand is something that's hard to define in an outright sense. The way I look at it is, how do we make someone feel when they engage with us, whether it's our website, our Instagram, our text line. The text line that we have at our office is incredibly convenient for patients. Again, being on brand, I'm a young working mom. It's incredibly hard for me to call the pediatrician's office and ask about XYZ. And so by having a text line for our patients, that's on brand of something that I would want to have as a patient. And then that's also, an extension of our team. I want every one of our team members to portray our brand in terms of being loving and compassionate to every patient that we see, understanding that sometimes we see patients at their not best. After surgery, people are sleep deprived, they might be in pain. And so making sure that we're serving as a resource for them from the initial touch point all the way until we graduate them out of our practice.
Makes sense. Let's talk about your team. You said you only had 3 people when you opened your doors. Who were those 3 people? What were their roles? And then how did you think about it? I think one comment you made is, hey, I went through medical school. This can't be that hard, right? Business. So, but it's important to not second guess yourself, be very clear on what you're trying to do. So you were clear, right? I mean, like, too many doctors who have been practicing for 10 years don't have the guts to put their prices online. So like it just takes, so like talk about your thoughts around people and all that good stuff, all the way from the beginning till now.
When we opened, I had a nurse and a patient coordinator. And we all knew that we were going to be the Jack and Janes of all the things. As we've grown, we now have 2 patient coordinators. We have some more nurses. I have a nurse practitioner. We also have an anesthesiologist who comes in for surgery days to provide sedation. So I think I told the team the other day, I want your days to be about 75% full so that the other 25% of your day is left for things that come up last minute, whether it's a post-op patient that's needing a little bit more TLC or a couple walk-ins that come in and want to spend 10 or 15 minutes talking about skincare. Really, the day when you feel like your day was 95% full, that means we need to hire another team member so that none of us are getting overworked and things are getting dropped. I think one of the biggest challenges for me, growth-wise, has been recognizing that I am an anomaly in my background and the people that I've worked with. So in medical school and residency and fellowship, you are around a certain personality type that just works their butt off. And it's been a little bit of a mind shift for me in recognizing that that's unique. People did not spend their 20s and 30s like I did working 80 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've had to tell myself that, well, yes, I was a chief resident and I ran a group of residents, but my team now today is very different than the group of surgical residents that I previously oversaw. And I have to tell myself that a lot, which is okay. But it was a challenge that I didn't foresee going into it.
Right. So I assume you made mistakes and you corrected those mistakes. Was there a lot of like hiring mistakes or you not being the version of yourself you needed to be because you were still probably wearing this chief resident hat, which is different from, the people you're managing today. So talk to us about how do you correct and how do you, calibrate? Like, how do you on one hand, you're doing the work, but on the other hand, you're critiquing yourself and, watching what's going on and like getting new information and adjusting.
I think the biggest struggle for me right now is being candorous with people and giving them tough feedback because I don't want to hurt their feelings. I don't want to come off as harsh. I think especially being a female, I get this fear that I'll come off as a bitch. But I also think when I struggle with that, I tell myself the business is too important. I can't not give a team member some critical feedback because I don't want to hurt their feelings. Because if it's going to hurt the business or if it's going to hurt our group vibes, then I'm doing myself a disservice. But I can't say I've figured that out quite yet because I still struggle with that from day to day. And another thing that I struggle with is when one team member comes to me with problems with another team member. I struggle on when should I intervene between the two of them? When should I let the two of them figure it out? So, you know, I think moving forward, the first 2 years were getting the business up and going, accruing patience. I think that the next couple of years, there's a lot of room for improvement in terms of me being a boss and a leader.
Fair enough. I was looking at your Google reviews. You're getting a pretty decent number of Google reviews, like 4 to 5 a month. What's your secret to get those amazing reviews every single month?
The way I ask for them and the way we take care of people. So
Hmm.
I think that I mean every provider thinks that they do a great job and they take great care of people. I think the biggest thing that has helped us get some of our reviews is I will ask patients from me personally from my cell phone. I will say, "Hey, you looked fantastic today at 6 weeks after surgery. I'm so excited for your longer term results. Here are some before and afters of your progress. Would you leave us a review?" And they will often say yes. So they have committed in their mind to giving you a review. And I say, perfect, here's the Google link. And I send it to them. Whereas if I just say, hey, would you leave us a review? If so, here's the link. Then they're like, everybody's busy. They're like, oh, yeah, I'll get to that. But if you don't send them the link to start with and you say, hey, would you leave us a review? And they say yes, then they have committed to you that they will.
Mm. So asking for that is key, and then making sure they can do it right then and there versus, oh, I'll get to it when I get to it. Then usually they never get to it.
And I don't think that sending reviews in an automated way is a high yield. We don't send them from our EMR. We don't send them as big group text messages. We personally ask each patient if they would leave us a review.
I love that because that's how you're getting these love letter reviews, because you ask, they're feeling so good about you, and right there they can just go to go to that link on their smartphone and write a wonderful review that's like 50 words long, and they just like a love story, and that's kind of what you want. So that's amazing. Um, you are an anomaly. Your work ethic, your confidence, the way you execute it, and I guess even having a husband who's in real estate, all these things happen, right? And so, any advice you have for people, uh, both young and old, people early in their practice ownership career or mid or late career, anything that you learned over the last 2 years that you would suggest that they, remember or pay attention to?
I would say two things. The first is that if in a bubble you could create your perfect job, that's where we should start. We should think about what exactly do we want to be doing every day? What environment do we want to be in? What kind of team members do we want to work with? What kind of patients do we want to take care of? And you should work backwards from there
Hmm.
versus trying to say, like what I did, initially I was like, what group can I join? Oh, what group, what practice could I buy? Like I think that's the wrong way to go about it because then you end up 20 years into your career doing something that you didn't actually want to do.
Yeah.
So I think starting with the end in mind and working backwards. And then I think the other thing is something I commonly have to remind myself is that anything that's good in life is hard.
Hmm.
Like marriage is hard, being a parent is hard, becoming a surgeon is hard. Running a business is really, really hard. But I would rather it be hard and good than just be easy and boring.
Right.
So, on the days when I feel overwhelmed now and when I was growing and building the business, it's like I'm still working towards what I want to do. And so, just working through those hard days or hard hours or hard cases, it's in the end, it's worth it. You have to get through it, one day at a time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lauren. I really appreciate your time today. It's just a wonderful conversation. You're very honest. You're very straightforward. And I think one of the key attributes of successful leaders is they're honest. They're honest with themselves. They're honest with others. Because if you're not honest, and I guess they call it in the entrepreneurial world, brutal honesty, right? Like you have to be honest where it's so painful sometimes. But if you're fooling yourself and fooling others, you're going in circles, so it's better to be honest and especially with oneself, right? Like when things don't work out, having the humility to say, okay, I made a mistake here, I need to change. So thank you for everything you have done and everything you have shared and everything you do for the community. I really appreciate it. Would love to have you back on panels, other ways you're giving back. So really appreciate what you're doing, Lauren. I also want to take a minute again to thank our audience. If you love this podcast as much as I did, share it with your friends, write a review for us on iTunes or Google. And till we see you again on another amazing episode of the podcast, have a wonderful week ahead.